Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Times Dominion's Edge *, watching the stars through the massive viewport. His forearms moved with practiced precision across the control panels, checking the ship's status for the 100th time that day. The Galactic Empire had ruled this sector of space for over 3,000 years, and nothing ever surprised them anymore. That was about to change. "Admiral," came the voice of Lieutenant Veltar from the communications station. "We're receiving strange readings from the outer sensor array." Zethkar's primary eyes focused on the young officer, while his secondary eyes continued monitoring the displays. "Define strange, Lieutenant." "Sir, there's a ship approaching our patrol zone." "But," Veltar paused, her tentacles twitching nervously over her console, "it's not in any of our databases." The Admiral's massive frame turned completely toward the communications station. In 3,000 years of Imperial dominance, every ship, every design, every space-capable species was cataloged in their vast databases. The Empire made sure of that. It was how they maintained control. "Show me," Zethkar commanded. The main display lit up with sensor data. A single ship appeared on the screen, moving through space at a steady pace. It was smaller than most Imperial vessels, with strange curves and angles that didn't match any known design. The hull seemed to be made of some unknown metal that barely reflected their scanning beams. "Computer, identify vessel," the Admiral ordered. "Vessel unknown. No match found in Imperial databases. Architecture unrecognized. Species of origin undetermined." The bridge fell silent. Every officer turned to stare at the display. In their long careers, none of them had ever heard the computer say those words. "Where did it come from?" Zethkar asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Unknown, sir," replied Sensor Officer Crixlon. "It just appeared on our screens about 10 minutes ago. No hyperspace signature, no wormhole activity, no dimensional rifts. It's like it was always there, but we know it wasn't." The Admiral studied the strange vessel. It was roughly 200 meters long, sleek and efficient-looking. There were no obvious weapons ports, no shield generators that he could identify, no communication arrays that matched Imperial designs. Yet something about it made him uneasy. "Scan for life forms," he ordered. "Scanning, sir." Crixlon worked his controls. "I'm detecting approximately 50 life forms aboard the vessel. But Admiral, the readings are unusual." "Unusual how?" "The biological signatures don't match any known species in our databases. They're carbon-based, like many species, but their neural activity patterns are unlike anything we've encountered." Admiral Zethkar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. In all his years of service, expanding the Empire across the galaxy, they had encountered hundreds of species. Some had joined willingly, others had been conquered, but all had been cataloged and understood. This was different. "Sir," Lieutenant Veltar called out urgently, "the vessel is changing course. It's heading directly toward us." "Battle stations," the Admiral commanded immediately. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship as the crew prepared for potential combat. "Raise shields. Charge weapons." "Shields up, sir. All weapon systems online and ready." The unknown ship continued its approach, showing no signs of slowing down. It moved with a confidence that puzzled the Admiral. Any species encountering an Imperial dreadnought for the first time should be terrified. These ships were the size of small cities, bristling with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. "Sir, we're being hailed," Veltar announced. On screen, the main display changed, and for the first time in his life, Admiral Zethkar saw a human being. The creature stood upright on two legs, had pale skin covered partially by some kind of uniform, and possessed only two eyes that stared directly at him with unsettling intensity. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Times Endurance *", the human said in perfect Imperial standard. "We request safe passage through this system." The Admiral was stunned. Not only was this an unknown species, but they spoke the Imperial language flawlessly. How was that possible? "Unknown vessel, you are in Imperial space. Identify your species and state your business here." The human's expression didn't change, I am human. My species originates from a planet called Earth. We are explorers, seeking knowledge and peaceful contact with other intelligent life. Computer. Search databases for species human and planet Earth. Zethkar commanded quietly. No records found. This was impossible. The Empire had mapped every inhabited world in this galaxy. They had contact with every spacefaring species. How could an entire civilization exist without their knowledge? Captain Chen, the Admiral said carefully, your people are unknown to us. The Galactic Empire requires all spacefaring species to register with Imperial authorities. You will follow us to the nearest Imperial station for processing. The human's expression finally changed. A slight smile appeared on her face, and somehow that small change made the Admiral even more uncomfortable. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Admiral. We have other destinations to reach. This is not a request, Captain. This is an Imperial order. You will comply, or you will be destroyed. Captain Chen's smile widened slightly. Admiral, with respect, I don't think you understand the situation. We're not refusing because we're afraid. We're refusing because we choose to. The audacity of this statement shocked everyone on the bridge. No one spoke to the Imperial Navy this way. The Empire commanded and others obeyed. That was the natural order of the galaxy. Fire a warning shot, Admiral Zethkar ordered. Show them we're serious. The weapons officer's claws moved over his console, and a brilliant beam of energy streaked across space, passing just in front of the human ship. The shot had enough power to vaporize a small asteroid. The human ship didn't even slow down. Sir, Sensor Officer Crix Lon called out, his voice filled with confusion. They're not showing any signs of concern. No evasive maneuvers, no power spikes, no shield activation. Perhaps they don't understand what just happened, suggested Lieutenant Veltar. Admiral Zethkar looked back at the human captain on the screen. Captain Chen was no longer smiling, but she didn't look afraid. She looked disappointed. Admiral, she said, that was a mistake. The only mistake here is your failure to surrender, Captain. You have 10 seconds to change course toward Imperial Station 7, or we will open fire with full weapons. The human woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering something. Tell me, Admiral, how long has your empire controlled this region of space? The question caught him off guard. 3,000 years. Why? And in all that time, you've never encountered resistance you couldn't overcome? Of course not. The Empire is supreme. We have the most advanced technology, the largest fleets, the most powerful weapons. No single ship has ever been a threat to Imperial forces. Captain Chen nodded slowly. I see. That explains a lot. She paused, then continued. Admiral, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. My ship is going to continue on its current course. Your ship is going to let us pass. And then you're going to report to your superiors that you encountered something you don't understand. The sheer arrogance of this statement made Admiral Zethkar's blood boil. Time's up, Captain. Weapons, destroy that ship. Firing. It's sir. Every weapon on the Time's Dominion's edge times fired simultaneously. Enough energy to destroy a small moon erupted from the Imperial dreadnought, converging on the tiny human vessel. The weapons struck the human ship perfectly, and absolutely nothing happened. The energy beams simply vanished upon contact with the ship's hull, like water disappearing into sand. There was no explosion, no debris, no sign that the ship had been hit at all. It continued on its course, unchanged and undamaged. What just happened? Lieutenant Veltar whispered. Admiral Zethkar stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Sensors, report, did our weapons hit the target? Yes, sir. Direct hits confirmed. All weapons made contact. Then why is that ship still intact? Unknown, sir. The energy readings suggest our weapons simply stopped existing when they hit their hull. On the screen, Captain Chen was speaking again. Admiral, your weapons can't hurt my ship. Your shields can't stop our weapons. Your sensors can't track our movements when we don't want them to. And your databases can't tell you who we are because we've never let you find us. Admiral Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career: fear. That's impossible. No species has technology superior to the Empire. You're right, Captain Chen agreed. No species in this galaxy does. But Admiral, who told you we were from this galaxy? The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone stared at the human captain as the implications of her words sank in. You're saying... Admiral Zethkar began slowly. I'm saying that your empire, vast as it may be, exists in a very small corner of a much larger universe, and recently, some of my people decided it was time to see what you've been up to out here. The Admiral's tactical training kicked in. Helm, evasive maneuvers, communications. Get me fleet command immediately. Sir, the human ship is moving, called the helmsman. Admiral Zethkar looked at the display and felt his heart skip a beat. The human ship was no longer moving at the same steady pace. It was accelerating. Fast. Faster than anything he had ever seen. Speed increasing, reported the sensor officer. Passing maximum imperial velocity. Now exceeding theoretical maximum for known propulsion systems. The ship wasn't just moving fast. It was moving impossibly fast, and it was heading straight for them. Evasive maneuvers, the Admiral shouted, but it was too late. The human ship reached their position in less than 3 seconds, coming to a complete stop directly in front of the massive Imperial dreadnought. At this distance, the human vessel looked tiny compared to the Imperial ship, like a small boat next to a floating city. Admiral, came Captain Chen's voice. I want you to understand something. This conversation is being broadcast to every Imperial ship within 50 light years. They're all listening, they're all watching your sensors readings, and they're all about to learn something very important. Sir, Lieutenant Veltar whispered urgently, she's right. The communication is being transmitted on all Imperial frequencies. The entire sector fleet is receiving this. Admiral Zethkar realized with growing horror what was happening. This wasn't just a first contact situation. This was a demonstration. The humans were making a statement to the entire Imperial Navy. What do you want? He asked. Right now? Just to pass through. But Admiral, what my people want in the long term depends entirely on what your empire chooses to do next. You can report this encounter truthfully and recommend that your leaders approach us diplomatically. Or you can try to suppress this information and prepare for war. Are you threatening the Galactic Empire? Captain Chen's expression became deadly serious. Admiral, I'm trying to prevent a war that your empire cannot win. The choice is yours. The human ship began to move again, accelerating away from the Imperial vessel at that same impossible speed. Within moments, it was gone, leaving the crew of the Times Dominion's Edge Times staring at empty space. But Admiral Zethkar knew this was far from over. Everything had just changed, and the Empire had no idea what they were dealing with. Supreme Admiral Korathenex paced around the central command chamber of Imperial Fortress Prime, his 8 legs clicking against the crystal floor with each agitated step. The holographic displays surrounding him showed reports from across the galaxy, but his attention was focused on one particular transmission that had arrived 6 hours ago. Play it again, he commanded. The air in front of him shimmered, and the recording began once more. Admiral Zethkar appeared, his usually composed demeanor clearly shaken. Behind him, the bridge of the Times Dominion's Edge Times showed signs of confusion and fear among the crew. Supreme Admiral, I am reporting a code black encounter with an unknown species. The vessel displayed technology far beyond Imperial capabilities. Our weapons had no effect. I am transmitting all sensor data for immediate analysis. Korathenex watched the recording of the human ship moving at impossible speeds, watched their weapons completely fail to damage the small vessel, watched as his most experienced admiral was reduced to helplessness by a single ship from an unknown species. When the transmission ended, Korathenex turned to face the assembled Imperial High Command. 12 of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy stood before him, representing different species that had been conquered and absorbed into the Empire over the millennia. Opinions, he demanded. General Vox Miran, a reptilian creature with scales that changed color based on emotion, spoke first. His scales were currently a deep red, indicating extreme concern. Supreme Admiral, this could be a trick. Perhaps some rebel faction has developed new technology. The sensor readings are authentic, interrupted Science Advisor Nelny, a tall, blue-skinned being whose species was known for their analytical abilities. I verified them multiple times. The physics involved in what we witnessed should be impossible. Their propulsion system alone violates several fundamental laws of energy conservation. Admiral Kethran, one of the few other members of Korethnak's own species, stepped forward. Supreme Admiral, even if their technology is superior, it's one ship. One ship cannot threaten an empire that spans thousands of worlds. One ship destroyed the Times Dominion's Edge's Time's entire weapon output without taking any damage. Korethnak's replied coldly. One ship moved faster than our sensors could properly track. One ship spoke our language perfectly despite being completely unknown to us. Tell me, Admiral, how many such ships might they have? The question hung in the air, and Korethnak's could see the realization dawning on their faces. If this was their exploration vessel, what might their military ships be capable of? Sir, came a voice from the communications station. We have priority transmissions coming in from 17 different sector commands, all reporting similar encounters. The Supreme Admiral felt his primary stomachs clench. Similar how? Human ships, sir, moving at impossible speeds, all refusing Imperial authority, none taking any damage from weapons fire. And Supreme Admiral, the communications officer paused nervously. They're all heading toward the Galactic core. Show me. A massive holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots began appearing throughout Imperial space, each representing a reported human ship. Korethnak's watched as more and more dots appeared, creating a clear pattern. They weren't random encounters. The humans were conducting a systematic survey of Imperial space, and they were doing it openly, daring the Empire to stop them. How many ships total? Korethnak's asked. Current count is 43 and rising, sir. They appear to be working in coordinated groups, covering different sectors simultaneously. General Vox Miran's scales had turned black, the color of despair among his species. This is an invasion. No, Science Advisor Nelm the corrected. This is reconnaissance. They're gathering intelligence about our capabilities, our locations, our strength. The question is, reconnaissance for what? Before anyone could answer, the chamber's main communication system activated. A voice filled the room, speaking in perfect Imperial standard. Supreme Admiral Korethnak's of the Galactic Empire. This is Admiral Marcus Thompson of the Earth Colonial Navy. I am requesting a diplomatic meeting. Every being in the chamber froze. The humans were contacting them directly at Imperial Fortress Prime, the most heavily secured location in the galaxy. The fortress's location was a closely guarded secret known only to the highest levels of Imperial command. Korethnak's activated his personal communicator. How are you receiving this transmission? Through your standard communication networks, Supreme Admiral. May I suggest switching to a more secure channel? What I have to discuss with you is important. Computer trace transmission source, Korethnak's commanded. Transmission source, unknown. Signal appears to originate from multiple locations simultaneously. The Supreme Admiral looked around at his officers. They were clearly just as confused as he was. Admiral Thompson, you will explain how you obtained our communication frequencies and the location of this facility. I will, but not on an open channel. Are you willing to establish a secure diplomatic communication? Korethnak's considered his options. Every instinct told him this was a trap, but his strategic mind recognized that they desperately needed information about these humans. Very well. Switching to Imperial Secure Channel 7. Thank you. Please confirm that only your senior command staff are present. The Supreme Admiral looked around the chamber again. Everyone present held the highest security clearances in the Empire. Confirmed. The main display activated, and for the first time, the Imperial High Command saw a human face. Admiral Thompson appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and steady eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple uniform that looked efficient rather than decorative. "Thank you for agreeing to this conversation, Supreme Admiral. Let me address your immediate questions. We obtained your communication frequencies by monitoring your transmissions for the past several months. The location of this facility was determined through careful observation of your fleet movements and supply lines." "Impossible," General Vox Moran interjected. "This facility is shielded against all known scanning methods." Admiral Thompson smiled slightly. "General, your shields are excellent protection against scanning methods known to your Empire. Unfortunately for you, we're not from your Empire." Science Advisor Nelmthy stepped forward. "You claim to be from outside this galaxy. Prove it." "Computer display star map," Admiral Thompson said, apparently speaking to someone off-screen. The display behind him changed, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. "This is your galaxy, which we refer to as Andromeda. Our home galaxy, which we call the Milky Way, is located approximately 2.5 million light-years from here." The Imperial officers stared at the display. The scale was beyond anything they had imagined. Their empire, which controlled millions of star systems, was just a tiny fraction of one galaxy among billions. That's impossible," whispered Admiral Kethran. "The energy requirements for intergalactic travel would be enormous." "You're correct. It took us nearly 2 centuries to develop the technology necessary for the journey. But General, you're missing the larger point. We didn't come here just to explore." Supreme Admiral Karethnax felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. "What did you come here to do?" "We came to evaluate a potential threat. You see, our long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures coming from this galaxy. The kind of signatures that typically indicate aggressive military expansion on a galactic scale. The Empire maintains order," Karethnax said defensively. "We bring peace to chaotic systems. Do you?" Admiral Thompson's expression became more serious. "Let me share some statistics with you, Supreme Admiral. Over the past 1,000 years, your empire has conquered approximately 400 civilizations. Of those, only 37 joined voluntarily. The rest were subjugated by force." "How could you possibly know that?" demanded General Vox Moran. "Because we've been monitoring your activities since we arrived in this galaxy 18 months ago." The statement hit the chamber like a physical blow. The humans had been watching them for over a year without detection. Every strategic discussion, every military operation, every expansion effort had potentially been observed. "You've been spying on us," Karethnax stated. "We've been evaluating you," Admiral Thompson corrected. "There's a difference. Spying is what enemies do to each other. Evaluation is what responsible civilizations do before making contact with unknown powers." Science Advisor Nelmthy raised a question that was bothering everyone. "If you've been watching us for 18 months, why make contact now?" "Because our evaluation period is complete, and because your empire is about to make a decision that will determine whether we become friends, neutral neighbors, or enemies." "What decision?" Karethnax asked. Admiral Thompson's expression became grave. 3 days ago, your empire approved Operation Galactic Cleanse, the systematic elimination of all remaining independent civilizations in this galaxy, followed by expansion into neighboring galaxies. The Supreme Admiral felt his secondary heart stop beating. Operation Galactic Cleanse was classified at the highest levels. Only 5 beings in the entire galaxy were supposed to know about it. "How do you know about that?" he whispered. "Because, Supreme Admiral, we've been listening to everything. Every communication, every planning session, every strategic briefing. Your security is impressive by the standards of this galaxy, but it's essentially non-existent by our standards." General Vox Moran's scales were now cycling through multiple colors rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. "Are you saying you could have destroyed us at any time?" General, I'm saying we could destroy your empire without firing a single shot. But that's not why we're here. Then what do you want? Korathnax demanded. Admiral Thompson leaned forward slightly. We want you to voluntarily abandon Operation Galactic Cleanse and enter into diplomatic negotiations with the remaining independent civilizations in this galaxy. We want you to transition from a conquering empire to a member of a galactic community. The request was so absurd that several officers actually laughed. You're asking us to give up everything we've built, Admiral Kethrin said. To abandon 3,000 years of expansion and dominance. Why would we ever agree to that? Because if you don't, we'll stop you ourselves. The chamber fell completely silent. Admiral Thompson's voice had remained calm and professional, but there was no mistaking the absolute certainty in his words. Supreme Admiral Korathnax found his voice. You're threatening war against the entire galactic empire. No, Supreme Admiral, I'm offering you a choice. Your empire can evolve into something better, or it can be forcibly disbanded. We hope you choose evolution, but we're prepared for either outcome. You underestimate our strength, Korathnax said, his pride finally overriding his fear. We have millions of ships, billions of soldiers, weapons that can destroy stars. Admiral Thompson nodded. Yes, you do. You also have approximately 14 billion sentient beings across your empire who had no choice in your government's decision to pursue galactic conquest. We'd prefer not to harm innocent civilians. The implication was clear. The humans were concerned about collateral damage, not about their ability to win a war against the empire. This conversation is over, Supreme Admiral Korathnax declared. The Galactic Empire does not surrender to threats from unknown aliens. We have ruled this galaxy for 3,000 years, and we will continue to rule for 3,000 more. Admiral Thompson looked genuinely sad. I was hoping you would choose differently. But Supreme Admiral, I need you to understand something. Your empire exists because no one has been able to stop you. That situation has now changed. Get off my communication system, Korathnax ordered. I will. But Supreme Admiral, when you begin Operation Galactic Cleanse in 6 days, remember that you were given a choice. What happens next is the result of the decision you're making right now. The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial High Command staring at a blank screen. For several minutes, no one spoke. Finally, Science Advisor Nelnthi broke the silence. Supreme Admiral, we need to consider the possibility that they're telling the truth about their capabilities. They showed us one ship, General Vox Mirren argued. One ship with advanced technology. We have millions of ships. They've been watching us undetected for 18 months, Nelnthi countered. They knew about our most classified operation. They contacted us directly at our most secure facility. This isn't just advanced technology, General. This is technology so far beyond ours that we can't even understand how it works. Supreme Admiral Korathnax looked around the chamber at his officers. Some looked confident, others looked worried, but all of them were looking to him for leadership. He made his decision. Operation Galactic Cleanse proceeds as scheduled. If these humans want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. Send orders to all fleet commanders. I want every available ship prepared for combat operations. It's time to show these upstart aliens what happens when someone challenges the Galactic Empire. What he didn't know was that 3 light years away, Admiral Marcus Thompson was sitting in the command center of the Earth ship Times Avalon Asterisk, a vessel so large it could have easily been mistaken for a small moon. Around him, dozens of officers were monitoring communications throughout Imperial space. Sir, reported Captain Lisa Rodriguez, they're mobilizing their entire fleet. Operation Galactic Cleanse is proceeding as planned. Admiral Thompson sighed. Very well. Send the signal to all Earth forces. Execute Operation Shield Wall. And Captain? Yes, sir. Make sure our first response is purely defensive. Maybe they'll realize their mistake before this goes too far. Captain Rodriguez nodded, but privately she doubted it. The Empire had ruled through force for so long that they couldn't imagine any other way of resolving conflicts. They were about to learn a very hard lesson about the universe beyond their galaxy. Supreme Admiral Corethnax stood on the command deck of his personal flagship, the Times Imperial Dominion *, watching as the largest military force in galactic history assembled around him. Over 2 million ships from across the Empire had answered his call, forming a fleet so massive that it blocked out entire star systems. The Times Imperial Dominion Times itself was a monument to the Empire's power. 15 kilometers long and bristling with enough weapons to destroy entire planets, it had been the personal ship of every Supreme Admiral for the past 500 years. Never once had it retreated from a battle. "Final count, Admiral?" Corethnax asked his aide. 2,300,000 ships. "Sir. Every available vessel in the Imperial Navy, plus planetary defense forces and auxiliary fleets. We've also activated the Omega Protocol." Corethnax nodded with satisfaction. The Omega Protocol meant that every conquered world was now contributing ships to the fleet, whether they wanted to or not. Species that had been subjugated centuries ago were being forced to fight alongside their conquerors. "Sir," called his sensor officer, "we're detecting movement in the target system." The main display showed the Kepler system, where Operation Galactic Cleanse was set to begin. It was home to a small, independent civilization called the Athari, who had somehow managed to avoid Imperial conquest for the past 2 centuries. They would be the first to be eliminated, serving as an example to any other worlds that might resist. But as the display focused on the system, Corethnax saw something that made his confidence waver. There were ships there, but not Athari vessels. These were sleek, unfamiliar designs that could only belong to one species. "Humans," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." Approximately 50 vessels positioned between our fleet and the Athari homeworld. 50 ships against over 2 million. The humans were either incredibly brave or completely insane. "Open a communication channel," Corethnax ordered. The display changed to show Admiral Thompson again, but this time he was standing on what was clearly a military bridge. Behind him, humans moved with calm efficiency, operating controls that looked far more advanced than anything in Imperial technology. "Supreme Admiral," Thompson said politely, "I see you've decided to proceed with your operation. Admiral Thompson, you have 50 ships positioned against the might of the entire Imperial Navy. Stand aside, and we will consider showing mercy to your species." Thompson's expression didn't change. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Supreme Admiral. These people have requested our protection, and we've agreed to provide it. Your 50 ships against our 2 million? Those are impossible odds, even with your advanced technology." "You're absolutely right," Thompson agreed. 50 ships wouldn't be nearly enough. Corethnax felt a moment of hope. Perhaps the humans were finally seeing reason. Then Thompson smiled. "That's why I brought 20,000. The sensor displays throughout the Imperial fleet suddenly erupted in warning signals. Ships began appearing throughout local space, emerging from what looked like tiers in reality itself. They materialized in perfect formations, surrounding the Imperial fleet from every direction. But these weren't the small exploration vessels the Empire had encountered before. These were massive warships, each one easily the size of an Imperial dreadnought, with weapon systems that made Imperial technology look like primitive clubs. "That's impossible," whispered Corethnax's sensor officer. "They just appeared. No hyperspace signatures, no energy buildup, nothing." "Dimensional fold technology," Admiral Thompson explained, as if he had heard the conversation. "We don't travel through space, Supreme Admiral. We step outside of it and back in where we want to be." Corethnax stared at the tactical display showing his fleet now completely surrounded by human ships. Even outnumbered 100 to 1, the humans had somehow achieved the superior tactical position. "You're still outnumbered," he said, trying to maintain his composure. "Numbers aren't everything, Supreme Admiral. But let me save us both some time." Thompson gestured to someone off-screen. "Computer, run tactical simulation." Imperial Fleet versus Earth Colonial Navy. A holographic display appeared between the two admirals, showing both fleets in miniature. The simulation began, with the Imperial ships opening fire first. Their weapons reached the human ships and simply disappeared, just like in all the previous encounters. Then the human ships returned fire. The Imperial ships didn't explode. They didn't break apart or burn. They simply stopped existing. One moment they were there, the next moment there was empty space where they had been. The simulation showed the entire Imperial fleet eliminated in less than 4 minutes. "Your weapons can't hurt our ships," Thompson explained. "Our weapons completely disintegrate yours. The simulation assumes perfect tactics on your part and no defensive actions on ours. Even under those conditions, the outcome is inevitable." Karithnak stared at the display, his strategic mind trying to find some flaw in the simulation, some weakness he could exploit. There was none. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly. "The same terms I offered before. Abandon Operation Galactic Cleanse. Enter into negotiations with the independent civilizations in this galaxy. Transform your empire from a conquering force into a peaceful member of a galactic community. And if we refuse, then we'll do what's necessary to protect innocent civilizations from imperial aggression." Karithnax looked around his bridge. His officers were all staring at the tactical displays, seeing the same impossible situation he was seeing. Some looked terrified, others angry, but none looked confident anymore. "You would destroy our entire civilization?" he asked. "No," Thompson replied immediately. "We would disarm your military and remove your government. The billions of innocent people living under imperial rule would be freed, not harmed." The distinction was important, and Karithnax understood it. The humans weren't threatening genocide, they were threatening revolution. "Give me a moment to consult with my officers," he requested. Of course. The communication ended, leaving Karithnax alone with his command staff. For several minutes, no one spoke. Finally, Admiral Kethran broke the silence. "Sir, we could surrender and live under human rule. Or we could fight and die with honor," added General Vox Miran, his scales showing the deep red of determination. Science advisor Nelms raised a different point. "Sirs, we need to consider what Admiral Thompson actually said. They're not offering to rule over us. They're suggesting we join some kind of galactic community." "What's the difference?" asked Kethran. "The difference is between being conquered and being reformed. If they wanted to rule this galaxy, they could have simply destroyed us without warning. Instead, they're trying to change us." Karithnax considered this. "You think they're telling the truth about wanting a peaceful galaxy?" "I think, sir, that a species with their level of technology has no need for conquest. They could take whatever they wanted from us without negotiation. The fact that they're talking instead of shooting suggests they genuinely prefer diplomacy." The Supreme Admiral looked at each of his officers. He had served the Empire his entire life, had participated in the conquest of dozens of worlds, had never questioned the rightness of imperial expansion, but now, faced with the reality of a power far greater than his own, he was forced to consider whether the Empire's way was truly the best way. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Athari homeworld." "Put it through." A new face appeared on the display, belonging to someone from the Athari species. They were humanoid but covered in fine, silvery fur, with large eyes that seemed to hold intelligence and sadness in equal measure. "Supreme Admiral of the Imperial Forces." The Athari spoke in accented Imperial Standard. "I am First Speaker Yethani of the Athari Council. We know you have come to destroy our world, as you have destroyed so many others." Karethnak said nothing. What could he say? The Athari were correct. "But we also know that other beings have come to defend us. Beings from beyond our galaxy who ask nothing from us except the chance to live in peace. We want you to know, Supreme Admiral, that we do not hate you. We understand that your empire believes conquest brings order. But we would like to suggest that there might be a better way." The transmission switched to show the surface of the Athari homeworld. Instead of the military fortifications Korethnax expected to see, the planet looked peaceful. Cities filled with beautiful architecture, parks and forests, people going about their daily lives. This is what we have built in our short time as a free world. First speaker Yethani continued. Art, music, literature, science. We have spent our energy creating rather than conquering. Our population is happy. Our technology advances through cooperation rather than theft from conquered peoples, and our children grow up without fear. The display changed again, this time showing other worlds. Dozens of them, all belonging to independent civilizations that had somehow avoided imperial conquest. These are our friends and allies, Supreme Admiral. Not subjects or conquered territories, but true partners. We share knowledge freely, help each other in times of need, and solve our problems through discussion rather than war. We would like to invite your empire to join us in building something better than what we have now. The transmission ended, leaving Korethnax staring at images of worlds that looked more prosperous and peaceful than many imperial planets. Sir, Admiral Thompson's voice came through the communication system again. Have you reached a decision? Korethnax looked one more time at his massive fleet, at the 2 million ships representing the military might of an empire that had ruled through fear for 3,000 years. Then he looked at the human ships surrounding them, representing a power so far beyond imperial understanding that resistance was meaningless. But more than that, he thought about the Athari homeworld, about civilizations that had found ways to prosper without conquest, about the possibility that there might be something better than the endless expansion and domination that had defined his entire life. Admiral Thompson, he said slowly, if we agree to your terms, what happens to our empire? Your empire becomes a democracy, Supreme Admiral. Your conquered worlds get to choose whether to remain part of a reformed government or become independent. Your military becomes a defensive force rather than a conquering one. And your people get to discover what it's like to live in a galaxy where cooperation is valued more than dominance. And if some worlds choose independence, then they become independent. No one will be forced to remain part of any government they don't want. Korethnax thought about this. Many of the Empire's conquered worlds would certainly choose independence given the chance. The Empire would shrink dramatically, become much smaller and weaker. But it would also become something it had never been before, legitimate. Very well, he said finally. I accept your terms. The Imperial fleet will stand down. Thank you, Supreme Admiral. That was the right choice. But even as Korethnax gave the order to his fleet, he noticed that some of his ships were not powering down their weapons. On his communication channels, he could hear arguments breaking out between commanders who wanted to surrender and those who preferred to fight to the death. Admiral Thompson, he called urgently, I'm giving the orders to stand down, but some of my commanders are refusing. We know, Supreme Admiral. We're monitoring all your communications. Don't worry about the ones who want to fight. We'll handle them. On the tactical display, Korethnax watched as approximately 300 Imperial ships broke away from the main fleet, charging toward the human vessels with weapons blazing. The human ships didn't even move to intercept them. Instead, the attacking Imperial vessels simply vanished, one by one, as they closed the distance. No explosions, no debris fields. They were just gone. The crews are unharmed, Admiral Thompson said, anticipating Korethnax's question. They've been transported to secure holding facilities on one of our ships. We'll return them to their families once this situation is resolved. The demonstration was over in minutes. 300 ships filled with thousands of crew members had been captured without a single casualty. The message was clear. The humans could have done the same thing to the entire Imperial fleet at any time. Supreme Admiral, came Admiral Thompson's voice one final time. Welcome to the Galactic community. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but I think you'll find that building something is much more satisfying than tearing it down. As Korethnax watched the human ships begin to withdraw, he realized that for the first time in his long life, he was genuinely curious about what would happen next. The Empire as he had known it was over, but maybe, just maybe, what came after would be something worth serving. 3 months later, Supreme Admiral Korethnak stood in the same command chamber where he had first learned about the humans. But everything had changed. The walls now displayed communications from across the galaxy, showing former Imperial worlds working together to solve problems, sharing resources and technology, building alliances based on mutual respect rather than fear. Admiral Thompson stood beside him, no longer as an enemy but as an advisor, helping to guide the transition from empire to democracy. "Any regrets?" Thompson asked. Korethnak considered the question. The empire was indeed much smaller now. Hundreds of worlds had chosen independence, reducing imperial space by more than half. The imperial military was now a defensive force, protecting trade routes and providing disaster relief instead of conquering new territories. But the worlds that remained had done so voluntarily. Crime was down, economic growth was up, and for the first time in centuries, imperial citizens seemed genuinely happy with their government. "No," Korethnak said finally. "No regrets. Though I do have one question." "What's that?" "Why did your people really come here?" "The truth this time." Admiral Thompson smiled. "The truth? We came here because our own history taught us what happens when militaristic empires go unchecked. Thousands of years ago, humanity almost destroyed itself in exactly the same way your empire was headed. We learned to choose cooperation over conquest, but it took a devastating war to teach us that lesson." He gestured toward the displays showing the peaceful, prosperous worlds of the new galactic community. "We came here hoping we could help another galaxy learn that lesson without having to fight that war. It looks like we succeeded." Korethnak nodded, understanding. The humans hadn't come as conquerors or saviors. They had come as teachers, offering the galaxy a chance to learn from humanity's own mistakes. Looking out at the stars, he realized that for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy was truly at peace. And somehow, that was more satisfying than all the conquests in Imperial history.